Welcome everyone to today's webinar, all about optimizing your donor retention strategy. We're very excited to share some tips and tricks with you today to really help get those donors to return year after year and just become advocates for your cause and really help you guys fulfill your mission. We're excited to be hosting Kindful today, who's our experts in this field, and is going to be sharing a lot of great information for you today. And that person who's going to be doing it is Bradley Martin. He is the Director of Donor Success at Kindful. Welcome, Bradley.
Hey, thanks for having us, Ian.
For sure. And my name is Ian Loth. I'm the Vice President of Fundraising here at Winspire. We love doing these webinars to really share industry best practices and help you optimize what you're doing out there in terms of the great causes that you are supporting. So with that, I wanted to just quickly share with you about Winspire. For those of you who are not familiar, what we do is we help secure unique bucket list auction items for your live auction, for your silent auction, for your raffle prizes, specifically travel packages. We've been in over 50,000 events globally and help serve just shy of 100,000 satisfied winning bidders, taking them around the globe on these incredible experiences. And we've helped raise over $56 million for nonprofit causes since 2008, which we're very proud of. And for those of you who are not familiar with how it works, we put together these donor travel experiences. They're no risk because you don't have to pay anything to use them in your event. It's no upfront cost to reserve them and promote them to your audience, round out that live auction offering, and then you can sell them as many times as you can at the event, and then you keep all proceeds above the nonprofit cost. You come to us after the event, tell us which package is sold. We take those winning bidders and we send them on their trips, and you guys keep all the proceeds. So it's a great tool for rounding out your auction offering and using it to promote your event, identify those high net worth donors at your event, and really get them into this donor life cycle that we're going to be talking about here today. Just a little overview as far as what we're going to be covering. We're going to start with the donor lifecycle overview. Bradley is going into acquisition tips and tricks, and going into how to effectively measure donor retention, then discussing some strategies to upgrade your current donors. And then we're going to finish with just some top selling packages, Winspire packages from 2018. But before we do, I always like to get a little participation from you guys to see what the industry is like out there in the nonprofit world. And we wanted to start with this question: see what if you know, what is your current donor retention rate? So I'm going to launch this poll right now, and the options are above 60%, 40 to 60%, 20 to 40%, below 20%, or you don't track your donor retention rate, or maybe you don't know your donor retention rate. This is a really important metric that everyone should be looking at. So go ahead and share with us, about what percentage of the time do donors come back year after year and stick with you. I'm going to leave it open for just a couple more seconds. Is it above 60, 40 to 60, 20 to 40, below 20, or maybe you don't know? Okay, we're going to close it here and share the results. Wow. All right, Bradley, what do you take of this?
I think it's a lot of what we would expect. You'll see a stat here in just a little bit that shows that, the average donor retention rate is around 45%. And so, but what we hear often is that it's not really an easy thing to track if you're not using the right tools. And so, or if you don't have the right tools at your disposal. So I'm not incredibly surprised by these numbers. I think it's, indicative of what we often see here at Kindful.
Great. All right. Well, looks like there's a lot of learning to be had, right? A lot of people who are maybe curious how to calculate this, because it's such a great metric to go by. We talk about key KPIs, key performance indicators. Your donor retention rate is definitely one that you should be following and impacting, right? With various initiatives, you can see your donor retention rate climb, and guess what that's going to affect? That's going to affect your bottom line, right? At the end of the day, we're looking for fundraising dollars to support your cause, and if your donor retention rate is improving, then so is your bottom line, right? So we're going to talk a little bit more about that here today. Wanted to kind of tie it in with events a little bit, just because that's what we deal with here so much here at Winspire. How important are events such as your annual gala in your donor retention strategy? I'm going to launch this poll here. Is it A, very important, B, somewhat important, D, not really important, D, not important at all, or maybe you don't host an annual fundraising gala and use that as part of your kind of donor strategy here. So we're gonna leave this open for just a few more seconds. Tell us how important your event is in your donor retention strategy. All right, 3, 2, 1. We're gonna close it and share the results. Great. Okay, it's good to hear that there's lots of you out there that use your events to. It's the one time of year where you get to be face to face with your donors, right? So it's a crucial time. Or maybe you have other events that you should be, hopefully planning and interacting. Maybe even if it's just taking your donors out to coffee. But the annual gala, big events are just a great place to really show face, to get your donors interacting with each other, and use it as a retention strategy to get people coming back to your cause year after year. Do you have much experience with events there, Bradley?
Yeah, we do have a lot of clients who do events. Personally, I'm not as much of an expert in events as what you guys are, but we're definitely know that a lot of our clients utilize events to raise funds for the organization.
That's great. Yeah, Bradley and I were just at the Raise 2018 conference put on by One Cause over in Chicago just a few short weeks ago, and talking to a lot of event planners out there, and really just I think a common theme was this donor life cycle, right? How to use those events to really engage your donors. So I'm glad to see that that's well understood out there. Cool. I'm going to hide results and we're going to push forward here. I'm going to hand this off to Bradley to present and talk a little bit more about this donor retention strategy. So with that, Bradley, I'm going to pass it off to you.
All right, wait for that to pop up there. All right. So Ian, can you see my screen?
I can.
Okay, great. And as Ian said, we're really excited to be here. And I'm excited to talk about optimizing your donor life cycle. Retention's a big piece of your donor life cycle, but I want to take it just a little bit broader and talk about not only retention, but talk about the full spectrum of the donor life cycle. So let me just dive right in and hit on what is the donor life cycle, right? What is this that I'm referring to? So again, retention's right there in the center as point number 2, but for us, it's acquisition, retention, and upgrades, right? And the simple definition we've come up with is it's the levels of engagement your donors or supporters go through as they deepen their relationship with your nonprofit, right? And I think if all of you nonprofit employees out there and change makers, I think one of the biggest things that you understand is that to be able to raise more funds, you have to build a deeper relationship with your constituents, right? So I think, we often get caught up in the process of figuring out we've got to raise more funds, we've got to get more out of our donors and things like that. Let me, caution you to say, if you just change that terminology a little bit and say, we want to deepen our relationships with our donors, right? That is a really good lens to look through as you think about your donor life cycle. So to move on, so traditionally, if you go look for anything like donor life cycle and stuff like that, one of the things you'll find is this kind of circular motion, right? And typically, what it's viewed on is more of an annual life cycle, right? Where based on your organization's calendar, you would have a circular thing that you do every year. So it might be that you have your spring golf tournament, your fall gala, and your end of year appeal. And those are things that typically you just do in a circular fashion. I think the thing to think about is that is really focused on your organization's timeline, which is important, but it's not as important as thinking about your donor's timeline, right? And so we would recommend that you take more of a linear view of those things, right? We know that each year you're going to market for your spring golf tournament, your fall gala, your end of the year appeal, right? But if you take those different marketing things and stop thinking about them so much as a circular or cyclical annual marketing plan, but instead start to think about how do I talk to people that are in different stages of their life cycle with my organization. And so this is a very, very simplified view of what a donor life cycle could look like, right? And again, it's saying cycle is a little weird because it's not a circular motion, but more of there are places where people can fall out. You see, we've got this lapsed area here where people can fall out and they need to be reacquired, right? Or they need to be re-engaged and brought back up. And so the way, again, going back to the way we think about it, is that you can have acquisition. So that's thinking about all your marketing tactics. How do you get people to be aware of your organization? And maybe the first, for many, many nonprofits, the first step in acquisition is their first donation, right? And I would encourage you to think about how can you get people, get their contact information in your database before their first donation? How do you engage them in a way to get them to engage with you? And so you can have more meaningful relationships with them. That might be through coming to an event. That might be through just signing up for a blog, things like that, right?
Yeah, let me jump in here real quick, Bradley. I think you just touched on it real quick, but just events, how important events are, especially if you're a local nonprofit, right, that's in your community. And events are a fabulous acquisition tool, especially for those major donors, right? The ones that you're going after that, you're trying to do networking in your community with amongst your board members and your already VIP donors. Enrolling them in coming to the event is a fabulous first step, right? And acquiring them and introducing them to your cause and getting them involved in the community, right?
Yeah, and I think that's a great point, Ian. And I would add to that is thinking about ways to get people to come to events that allow them to deepen that relationship, maybe without having to pay for a ticket, or something like that. Like, how can you rethink events as an acquisition strategy? Can you, if you have major donors, could you give each of those major donors an extra ticket to bring a friend, or something, to get people acquired so they can learn about your organization and they can become inspired to donate or to give. And so I think the next step, right, is once you have those people acquired, it is to get them to be a donor, right? And in some cases, on my next slide, what you'll see here is that not always does your acquisition strategy have to be focused on donors. That second line you see there is I created one that said, maybe I have a big volunteer push, so I want to make sure that I'm acquiring volunteers. It may not be focused at all, and they may be both donors and volunteers, but I want to really think about how do I get people to become a volunteer. So once they become a donor, you want to start thinking about retention and how do you keep them engaged. And then lastly, upgrading. How do you get them to be deep in their relationship so that they likely will give more to your organization, right? So again, you can kind of think about these in a few different segments. I wouldn't go crazy on this. I would be careful not to go beyond more than 5. Unless you have multiple programs and things like that, but really keeping it to 3 to 5 key segments can help you think about how do I handle someone who I think who has the propensity to be a major donor, who could be a volunteer, who could be just a mid-level donor, right? And so, but here's what we know is that, well, sorry, I've skipped ahead a little bit. The next thing, so what are the benefits of doing this, right? Number one, you can be more targeted in your messaging, yielding a greater ROI. Number 2, and I love this one, it's easier to identify the why in your appeals and messaging. One of the things we hear about most from our customers who are all nonprofits is that they struggle to figure out, once someone's given the first donation, what do I say again? How do I ask them for another donation? And I really think this framework can help you think about that why. Right? And so just humor me for a minute. So say someone's giving you their first donation. Maybe the next step is a few months later, you want to ask them for another donation, but you know that you're going to, you need to tell them the story of what their first donation did for your organization, right? And thank them for that first donation. And then the second donation can be that you want to continue to do more of that work. But once they've given a second donation, then now they're a recurring donor. You can start to think about your message a little bit differently, right? And it can be more about upgrading, right? And then three, the biggest benefit is you're going to gain greater trust with your constituents, leading to less attrition, right? And obviously that's our biggest goal, is to retain more and more of our donors. But here's the thing I wanted to show, is that here's what we really know, is that donor retention and lifecycle management is more like a game of chutes and ladders, right? It's not just straightforward. It's not just a linear path, right? It's more like that you have people who engage with you, they donate for the first time, maybe they've given 3 or 4 times, then they completely fall off the face of the earth and you have no idea why, right? And so what I'm trying to advocate for a little bit is that if you can break it down in more simple terms, it's just easier to track, right? It doesn't turn into this. If you don't have a really clear understanding of your donor life cycle, this is what it can feel like, right? But instead, if you really start to pick out the key things here, right? They're number one on the bottom, they're aware of our organization. They start to engage with it. They donate. They repeat that donate. They become a recurring giver, right? They're out. You're able to take them out and understand that they're a major giver, so we need to treat them a little bit differently, right? And then ultimately they become an advocate. These are just really, really key segments and key parts of the donor life cycle you can focus on to make it feel a little bit more easy to understand. So let's jump into each of these segments and go through a few things around specific stats that are, market stats that we have found, and then some quick tips on how you can do more or implement a couple new things around each of these key segments. So donor acquisition. So again, getting in specifically in donor acquisition, it's just the act of collecting new contact information around constituents. And so again, the key thing to think about donor acquisition is that it isn't necessarily, yes, we call it donor, right? But it isn't necessarily that they've given their first gift. It can be before that. So a couple key stats, right, is I thought one of the things I thought was interesting was on average, 1.2% of website visitors should donate, right? And so if you're using website as one of your strategies and you're getting about 1 in 100 people to donate, and that seems frustrating, just understand that is actually the average, right? That is a decent operating website, right? Also, you should expect about 1 in 100 people will sign up for your email list. So if you do not have people already, or if you do not already have a way for people to sign up for your email list, please add that to your website, right? Some people will sometimes suggest that that's a competing priority with your donation button. I would strongly disagree with that. It is really a great way. You put so much work into driving people to the website. If they aren't willing to give a donation, maybe your secondary call to action is for them to learn more about your organization. Another great way to do that is through advocacy, right? It's through like having people sign petitions and things like that. It's a great way to understand what they care about and then get them to actually sign up. So a couple things you can do, right, is number one, I just mentioned it, ensure your website has an easy way to both donate and to sign up without donating, right? 2, consider adding all of your constituents to your database, even if they haven't given yet. So another thing we notice is that many people will kind of keep their constituents off to the side, that maybe in an email marketing platform, but they don't really bring them all together in a way to see everybody. If you're using a donor management system, maybe you keep them in MailChimp or another email marketing platform. But having a holistic view of who has acquired recently or who you've acquired recently but has not yet signed up or has not yet given can be a really powerful thing in terms of keeping those two things separate. And then 3, use crowdfunding, peer-to-peer, or advocate strategies to take advantage of your current constituent networks. If you're not already doing peer-to-peer advertising or crowdfunding, it's a really great way to get those people involved that want to advocate for your organization. Oftentimes this works really well for volunteers who may not have the propensity to give yet. They may be in a spot in life where they just can't give, but they would love to raise funds for your organization. Make sure you're giving people that opportunity. So going on into donor retention. So this is the one that most widely researched, most widely understood is how, once you have a donor, how do you keep them giving year after year after year, right? So a couple quick stats around that, right? The average retention is at 45%. So what I mentioned earlier is that if you're retaining more than 45% of your donors, you're doing a phenomenal job. And retaining less than 50% doesn't feel great in some situations, but the average is closer to 45%, right? And again, over the last 10 years, it stayed under 50%, right? So how can we improve donor retention, right? So number one, ensure you're tracking your retention trends on a rolling 12-month versus a year over year. So let me explain what I mean there. So when we talk to many organizations, we find out that they are tracking their donors. Just did they give in 2017? And then at the end of the year, they're looking at 2018 and saying, did they give in 2018 also? The struggle here is that in some cases, let's say someone typically gives early in the year, maybe like in March, April, May, somewhere around there, right? They give their donation early in the year, and you're not reviewing that data until the end of the year. You may have missed your opportunity to re-engage them. And so what I'm suggesting is that when you're looking at donor retention, one of the key things you can do to ensure that you can retain more donors and you can engage them with a very meaningful message is look at, so right now we're in October, I would say that you should be evaluating the people who the last time they gave to your organization was last October, or maybe even last September at latest. And what you're really wanting to do is look and say, wow, you gave around this time last year. We've been able to do so much. And maybe you don't say anything that specifically, but maybe there's a reason in their personal budget, in many other, situations that they typically like to give this time of year. Maybe they have a personal reason, right, or something like that. And so looking at it year over year based on the month or even all the way down to the day that they gave is a really great opportunity to be very meaningful in your messaging. Get a message out that's very personal and hits the mark, right? Number two, when you're asking for another donation, make sure you're sharing the impact of the first donation made and your vision for the next donation. I recently, at the end of every year, I give to, I did give to one organization, and I got a appeal in the mail. And one of the things I noticed was that they just assumed I was going to give my next donation. They sent me, they didn't give me a lot of detail. They just sent me basically a postcard that said, hey, would you like to give the same amount you gave last year? And it happened to be that my wife and I feel pretty strong about that organization. But we also had another organization that had popped up in our life that we felt really strongly that we wanted to support. And so we ended up splitting our support that year. And I think the thing I kind of want to hit on here is that there was an opportunity there for them to really drive home that not just assume that I'm going to give again, but drive home the impact that we have made. I really struggled with it a little bit. I didn't know if we want to split it up. But, they didn't really provide me a lot of detail as to what was happening with the donation I was giving, what the impact it was making, and what their future plans were. And so I really think that that's a big opportunity when you're trying to retain donors year over year, ensuring that you're sharing the impact from the last year, the impact from the last donation, and what you plan to do with their next donation.
Bradley, I think that's such a crucial piece because it's so easy to just continue doing what you've always done in terms of sending out the same collateral, the same appeal, and there is so much competition out there in terms of people getting similar appeals from other organizations, right? And so always making sure that your message is at the forefront and the impact and what people how their dollars are actually making an impact would probably arguably could have kept you going, right, with them with a full donation if you would have known, hey, I don't want to donate any less because I won't have the same impact as I did this year. I think that's a really important piece.
Yeah, and and I think it's something that, again, I think it just gets missed a little, and it's unfortunate that happens. But in the rush, in the crunch for time and resource trap, it's one of those things sometimes we can leave out. Lastly, when you're using email, make sure your strategy includes multiple emails instead of just one. So this is another big thing that we have seen happen, is that especially when you're trying to retain a donor. So imagine now it's October. I locate that, hey, here's a handful of donors who gave this last October, but they didn't give this October. I want to send them out an email campaign. And I send them one email that does a great job of showing the impact. It does a great job of telling them what I'm going to do next year with their donation. But I only send one, right? I'm probably an extreme example, but I'm looking at my phone right now, and in my personal inbox, I have 27,000 unread emails, which is crazy.
You are kidding me.
But that's not my work email. That's my personal email.
Oh, okay.
But the thing about that is that my personal email, I just, between getting 3 or 4 emails a day from Target and every other place I get emails from, is that it's easy for a couple days to go by and me not really get it cleaned out and me just miss an email altogether, right? A really great open rate is about 20% for an organization. And so what I'm adding here is, if you're just sending one email, right, there's an 80% chance that your donor is going to miss it just because it gets buried with all the other stuff, right? So a great strategy could be to, if you're using an email marketing platform, you can probably even see this, who all open your email. And if they didn't open the email, just send them the same email at minimum over again a week later with a different subject line. I know that might seem like, really, you do that? But yes, yeah. Because if they haven't opened it, they don't know that that you sent them the second email twice. And the likelihood a week later that they're going to open that old one is actually slim to none. And so, and then you could take that a step further, even with your mail appeals, right? If your mail appeals you don't get a response for it, send another one, right? And that gets expensive, of course, but for the right to retain a donor, it very well may be worth it, right? So those are some things that consider when you're retaining. So next thing is donor upgrades. Now, this is something I get really excited about. I think it's something that a lot of nonprofits just don't have the ability to focus on, maybe is the right way to say it. It just it's kind of tough to track, and I think it's really valuable. And so the definition around donor upgrades is someone who gave more this year than they did last year. Sounds simple, right? And typically what we have found is people know this for their major donors really, really well, right? They know that a major donor has given more this year than they did the year before, and they have thanked them, and they have, made sure that they are aware that they gave that much, right? But what happens for your mid-level and low-level donors, right? And I think if many people I speak with say, we just don't have the time to really dig into that and track it, right? And so a couple key stats around this, right, is that 88% of, so a lot of these stats are around recurring giving, and you're going to see how I make this connection in a minute. But 88% of total dollars raised comes from 12% of donors, right? Monthly giving accounts for 17% of all online revenue, right? So, again, those major donors up at the top, right? That 12% likely, but there's probably another 88% or so that you just are having a hard time tracking, or you just don't have time to dig into, right? On average, a recurring donor gives 40% more a year than one-time donors. So someone who gives monthly typically gives 42% more, right? And $27 is the average monthly donation. So why does all this matter, right? So number one, so what if you're not currently allowing people, or you don't have a process for accepting monthly donations, right? It's a really great opportunity, right? It's to offer donors the option to donate on a recurring basis rather than all at once. And if you just think about the psychology and the ability of this, if you've got someone who typically gives $100 per year, and they give it typically at the end of the year. What if you ask them instead in your next appeal to give $10 per month for the next year versus $100 one time, right? Now, not only have you retained them, but in addition, you've actually increased their donation by 20% because now they're going to give $120 instead of $100, right? Number two, a great way to upgrade people is to use personalization to remind donors how much they gave last year and make it easy for them to give more this year. So I heard a great, I can't remember the name of the organization off the top of my head, but I heard this great study or a great use case where an organization was using the email marketing platform. And what they did is they sent all their donors out. That was their big end of the year campaign. They sent all their donors out a message and said, we are really just asking everyone to give 10% more this year than they did last year. We made this huge impact last year, and here's all the things that we're going to be able to do. And when you click the call to action in the email, it took them to a web page that already had all that data filled in, so it was really easy for them to give that additional 10%. But they also added a button that said, and if you want to help us even more, give 25% more, right? So they made just this really, really easy for everyone. And what ended up happening was that they ended up raising like 115% more than they did the year before just by making that ask. And so there's some strategies and ways to do that, but just ask for people to give more, right? And again, you have to make sure that you're couching that ask or giving that ask with the idea of what is the impact going to be. And then number three, make sure you have a strategy to acknowledge all donors who upgrade. So again, this is where things start to fall apart, right? If you've got thousands of people in your database, or maybe even hundreds, and they're giving at different times of the year, and they're and you know, many of them are mid-level and lower-level donors. It's a really big opportunity to make sure you have an easy way to spot how who has upgraded, and that you're making sure you acknowledge that, right? That you take the time to say, hey, Jim, I noticed that you gave $100 this year, and this year you gave $110. Thank you so much. We're going to be able to do so much more with that. I really appreciate not only you continuing to support our organization, but willing to increase your support this year. That would mean so much to someone, right? And so I think really taking the time, and again, you can automate a lot of that, but taking the time to do that's really important.
Hey, Bradley, got a question from Sarah Hoberg here. She just was looking for clarification. She said, so it was an email appeal. When they clicked to donate, did it calculate the 10% individually, or did they do it themselves, the 10% or the 25% or more?
So I'm going to get a little technical here, if you can bear with me for a second. I know the organization was using Emma email marketing, and you could probably do this with any email marketing platform. But what they were doing was they had actually created a custom field in the email marketing tool that was their last year donation, and then they had used Excel to create another field that was what would be 110% of that. So if it's $100, the one field said $100, the other field said $110. And then what they did is they uploaded all that data into custom fields into their email marketing platform. And so what that allowed was for them to use personalization tags in the email, if you know how those work, to pull out those exact numbers. Mm-hmm. And they had done some wizardry with their development team to say, if someone clicks, the link is actually going to have the 110% dollars in it, which made the landing page spit out that amount. So there was quite a bit of technology behind that. But if you wanted to just remind them, the simplest thing you could do is say, here's how much you gave last year in a custom field, and then here's how much 110% would be. We'd love for you to give that much more. So it's super personalized. So imagine an email that goes out that says, hey, Bradley, thanks so much for your $100 donation last year. We were able to do X, X, and X. Here's the impact we made. We're asking all of our organization or all of our donors this year if they could just give a little more, if they could do 110%, or if you could give $110 this year, we're going to be able to do X% more, right? And then maybe it doesn't have to have all that technology behind it to make it, you know, super seamless, but you're suggesting what the donation could be based off of their personal donation last year. Does that make sense? Did I
Yeah,
explain that okay?
yeah, I think that explained it really, really well. And on that note, if you all have any questions that you want to ask throughout, go ahead and use the little questions pane, and we're actually going to have a Q&A section at the very end. But I thought that was a great question from Sarah, just in terms of clarification there. So I thought that was great. Thank you, Sarah, and thank you, Bradley.
Yeah, thanks, Sarah. And sorry, I know that's getting a little technical, but I mean, it's something that I think could be incredibly powerful. It takes a little bit of time, but man, it can be really powerful. So let's move on to let's see. The next couple of slides here is just thinking about this with technology, right? So how do you? I keep talking about how do you make this easier? How do you have this data at your fingertips, right? So some things here. If you don't have a donor management system in place, that's what we do here at Kindful. But there's plenty of great options, right? We're great for many organizations. For some organizations, they need something a little bit different. We may not be a good fit, right? And we recognize that. But here's a couple things to think about, right? Number one is tracking. Knowing the right information about each of your donors is incredibly important when it comes to building meaningful donor relationships. And so one of the things to illustrate, one of the things we run into all the time is people say, well, I'm using my email marketing tool for this. I'm collecting donations in PayPal, and I'm using Eventbrite to register people for events, and I'm using Square to take transactions at the event. Man, that's a lot of different data sources, right? And so being able to take all those data sources and put them in one place, so you can look at Ian's profile and say, wow, Ian gave us a donation through PayPal. He also sent us a check. He came to our event last year, didn't donate there, and he's opened his last 3 emails we sent, right? Like, let's say we're really wanting to reach out to Ian. How valuable could that be if you had all that data at your fingertips, right? So number 2 is automation, right? The right technologies can save loads of time by automating tasks that you may have employees or volunteers managing today. So again, moving all that data between tools, right? So taking the data from Eventbrite and uploading it to MailChimp, or the data from PayPal and uploading it to MailChimp, or all those different things takes time, takes volunteer hours, takes employee hours. Having a tool that can actually do all that seamlessly on the background can be really valuable in terms of time saving. And then number 3, being able to spot trends and understand key segments, like for example, people who've upgraded and things like that, will help you know what step to take with your donors, right? So again, in Kindful, this isn't a Kindful demo, but in Kindful around upgrades, for example, we have a metric right on the dashboard that you can click on, and you can see everyone who's upgraded, right? And you can make sure that they've been acknowledged for that. And so here are a couple categories I think you should consider when you're thinking about technology, right? So your fundraising tool set, right? The right fundraising software will help you track giving history and trends, and help you track specific campaigns or program giving, right? So again, if you're using PayPal and things like that, very, very valuable. I don't want to discount that it's valuable or not, but getting the right tools in place can really start to help you make sure you understand what programs people are giving to, and and specifically in some cases just make things like tax receipting much, much easier. Number 2, email marketing. So there's tons of options around email marketing, but I always go back to sometimes just the simplest tools are best. MailChimp, Constant Contact, Emma, things like that are really, really effective at what they do, and that is sending emails to segmented lists, and getting into the inbox, right? Number 3, payment processing. So as you get a little bit bigger and you're thinking about fundraising and things like that, you may want to consider tools like Stripe and things that you can get some discounts there. And it's just really when you start to really wanting to beef up your online donation process. And then 4, when you really want to bring all this together, when you start to get into hundreds, if not thousands of donors, a donor management platform can help you bring all of that data into one place. And then you have the full picture of all your donors, their giving history, and their life cycle stage. So again, we understand not everybody needs a donor management system, but at some point when you start to feel like, man, I'm really losing control of understanding where all my donors are and how to engage with them, donor management software may provide a lot of clarity, right? And so So if you want to start thinking about how to implement this, right, I would start with your data, right, and start to think about where are you collecting all this information, right, and what information do you have about your donors. It might be a time where you go, wow, we are not collecting near enough. We're not learning enough about our donors. We want to go collect a little bit more. Number two is map out those different life cycles. Keep it simple. Keep it to 2 or 3 to 5 key segments, but map out how you expect your donors to initially engage with your organization. How do you ask them to give the first time? What are you doing in the ability to retain them? What do you do if they fall out, if they lapse, right? And really, really start to think about it. A good exercise is just hang up those different strategies on the wall. You know, like if you have an event, put a picture of the event on the wall, right? If you have emails that go out, put those emails on the wall, and really look at the whole life cycle and go, wow, this is really great. It looks great together, or we're missing this key piece. Or you may go, man, this just is very disjointed, right? So making it real. Number 4, get into their mindsets. Talk to your donors, right? Take the time to understand not just your major donors, everybody. Understand why did they give to your organization? Why are they supporting your organization? What's their big why, right? And you might find some trends just by talking to a couple of people that really surprise you. And then 5, make sure everyone understands this. Implement it across your teams, right? So if you're wanting to really start to build a roadmap for how you implement this, is you can follow some of those steps. So lastly, quickly about Kindful, I mentioned a little bit throughout. If you are looking to improve your donor lifecycle process and improve your acquisition, retention, and upgrade, that's where a tool like Kindful come in. We're donor management software that helps nonprofits organize their data and manage their donors better so they can make a greater impact on the world. And really, so our goal is to try to take what is complex in donor management and just try to make it somewhat easier and allow you to use best-in-class tools like MailChimp, QuickBooks, CrowdRise, Eventbrite, all those different tools. We have like 47 different integrations. And what we're looking for is to allow you to use the tools that can help your organization grow, but then bring all that data in one place so you can understand your donors better. So Ian, thanks so much for letting us talk through this today. Really, really appreciate it. And I think you're going to take it back over here and go over a couple other things, right?
No, that was awesome. Great stuff. I'm gonna show my screen. Hopefully you guys can see it. Thank you to Bradley. That was, I think, some really insightful information. I know there's probably plenty of you who are still probably stuck using Excel sheets to manage certain aspects of your donor life cycle. And I'm a huge advocate for using platforms like Kindful, and Kindful is one that I've gotten a chance to use and have been very impressed with, and just the amount of insight that you can get to have everything in one place to really develop your strategy for retaining donors is just so crucial. So thank you for presenting that information today. You're going to get you can email Bradley at hi@kindful.com. We're also going to have a post survey that you can fill out if you want to learn more. Just say yes, you want to learn more about Kindful, and we'll have Bradley reach out to you guys. Real quick before we let you all go, wanted to share just some of the top selling items so far in 2018 as far as packages go. Maybe you have an event coming up here in October or November that you're looking for some travel packages to offer in your live auction or silent auction. These are some of the best sellers. Tuscany Culinary Escape, always a top seller. Ireland Adventure. We also have a Game of Thrones package in Ireland. It's just huge. You can go around and see all the Ireland castles where they filmed. Napa Backroads and Railroads, always a popular seller for Napa Valley, especially if you're over on the East Coast. The California wine packages always go hot. And then, of course, our tropical ones. Punta Cana is a top seller. Oh, and Hamilton, Chicago. It's actually selling better than New York now, which is kind of crazy. The price point's a little bit less, but you can get into Hamilton, Chicago. We also have some options for allowing you to actually visit with the cast and do a pre-show meet and greet with the cast before you head in, and then watch this amazing Broadway play. So if you're interested in any of these, you can go to winspireme.com and you can add them to a wish list. And then if you save that wish list, we'll have one of our fundraising specialists reach out to you. We also have some top selling hotel only packages that are great for your silent auction all around the country, all around the globe. We partner with Preferred Hotels and Resorts. We also have a promotion right now for we're selling this inventory. 30% will go back to your cause if you distribute it out to your constituents, your staff, your family, your friends. If you go to hotelgiveback.com, you can see some really discounted hotel stays there. And again, anybody that books will get 30% will go back to your cause. So if you go to hotelgiveback.com and send anybody there, it's just another great way to raise some money for your cause. If you want to learn more, again, visit winspireme.com. We'd love to chat with you about your event. And then if you're not subscribed to our blog, Winspire News, we're doing a giveaway coming up in November 1st. We're giving away a $1,000 travel package to a lucky blog subscriber that they can then use in their fundraising event to raise money. Actually, you can use it for yourself if you want. We won't tell, but we're giving that $1,000 travel package away on November 1st. So go to winspireme.com/giveaway to subscribe and also enter to win. And last but not least, then we're going to get to a couple questions here. We have our blog, eventswithbenefits.com. We actually just interviewed Bradley for an episode where we talked all about donor lifecycle management. We're going to be posting that here in the coming weeks. So wherever you get your podcast, you can search on iTunes, your podcast app, or you can just go to eventswithbenefits.com. My partners Danny Hooper and Renee Zhao are just fabulous. We interview all these industry experts, everything to do with event fundraising. So check it out, eventswithbenefits.com. And last but not least, we have our questions, Q&A here. So we actually have one more question from Sarah for you, Bradley. If anyone else has a question, go ahead and put it in your question pane right now. Anything about donor lifecycle management or just event fundraising in general, we'd be happy to answer them. Sarah asks, how do you find out their why? Email, phone call, after thank you letter, etc. I think you talked a little bit about the donor's why. What do you recommend there, Bradley?
So I think, broadly, I think what you're trying to do is find a couple of different trends in your database. Like if you have more than a few hundred donors, it's a little hard to figure out every individual's why, right? But I think if you do this through conversation, right, and I think is one of the best ways. I think, especially because nonprofits, and one of the things I've seen that I think can be really interesting is even at your events, having your staff plan and even your volunteers really plan on asking that question. So, hey, why do you love supporting our organization, right? What inspired you to support us? And I think what you can do is then come back and ask those volunteers, that staff, to give their top 3 things they heard, right? So you can send your staff a survey, right? But if you have an event with a lot of people come, have them ask that question as much as they can, and then send them a survey and have them put their top 3. And I bet you'll be surprised to find that you'll get 5 to 6 top answers, right? And then you can start to think about how do you work that information into your marketing day in and day out, right? And so, does that make sense? I think that is a really great way, because you might hear one thing from one person, but talking to many people, you may hear that there's a couple key themes that will just present themselves that you may not even have known were there. But that is a really great way, I think, to pull out that information.
Yeah, you can turn it into a full campaign, right? Make it send out an email with a survey of like, hey, tell us what your why is. Make it a social media campaign that you bust out, and it's something that you can use to drive interaction. Create a hashtag, right? What's your why for your organization? And like Bradley said, it could give you whole new avenues of messaging that you didn't know that you had as far as what sort of impact your cause is making and why it's important to people, right? So don't hesitate to ask. Have it every single point in your funnel, right? Whether it's the first time people donate or there's a recurring donor, and when you're taking those VIP constituents out to coffee, making sure that one of the questions and things you discuss is, what is your why? Tell us why you support this organization. You'll be surprised the feedback that you'll get and the things you didn't even realize were out there, right? But you have to ask. And so I think, Sarah made a good point, kind of framing the question, email, phone call, after thank you letter, et cetera. Where do you ask? I would say, oh, you can do it in all those ways. Just, because having that conversation is actually going to enroll people even more. They love, people want to talk about themselves, as much as that kind of sounds a little shysty, right? It's true. The donors who are supporting your cause, they are philanthropists, but they also enjoy telling other people why they're doing it. And so asking that question a lot, I don't think has only upsides to it as far as you and your cause and what you're trying to accomplish.
Yep. Agreed.
Okay, great. Anything to add there, Bradley?
No.
Great. We have one other question from Misty here. And again, if you guys have any questions, now's the time to ask. So estate gifts and bequest giving prospects get overlooked. What is the best tool to use to ID these donors, in your opinion, Bradley?
Oh man. I think one of the estate gifts and what else?
Just the bequest giving, right? Those kind of the people who, post-human, after death, or the estate giving, I think that's a huge part of kind of the giving calendar. I mean, these can be major gifts. What are some ways that you can ID these donors and actually try to facilitate one of these gifts, especially around such a sensitive time, when people are deceased?
I think one of the things is, for the lack of a better way to say it, is getting ahead of that event, right? Mm-hmm. And really getting the donor or the person that is going to pass, right, to put that in place beforehand, right? Because I do think, and I think a great way to do that, right, is it's still through relationships, right? Mm-hmm. I do think that there are opportunities to do much of this through. I think there's some wealth giving tools out there that I think provide some great information around some of the stuff. But I think obviously it's a very delicate yes. process, and I would say that. Getting that committed beforehand, I think is one of the best ways. And I know that might sound obvious, but it's something that on the front end is much better placed. And so I think it's still an uncomfortable conversation to have, but once you build really deep relationships with those major donors, it gives you the ability to start to ask those questions, right. of the ones that you think are appropriate to ask that to, but that takes deep relationships, right? And here in Nashville, we have, I went to Belmont University, and I'm blanking on it. It's at the tip of my tongue. I can't come up with it, but there's a family there who has given so much to the university, right, in this way. And but that was planned out way before the death event happened. So I think there's some things there around. I just think it comes through relationships. You can't. It's not something you can do through email, and I'm not trying to make light of it, but I think if you make it more trivial, that's not going to come off well, right? I don't know that using tools is the right thing here outside of just building really, really deep relationships with your constituents.
One thing, and this is, forgive me, one thing that kind of comes to mind, and again, I do not have a ton of experience in this area, Misty, so take what I'm about to say with a grain of salt. But I mean, framing it in terms of, do you have a living will, right? Or maybe trying to refer people to, local services where that sort of estate planning and, having a living will, how important it is for friends and family, but also for causes, right? And it's framing it not just so that they can give to your cause, but what causes do you care about? Making sure that you're planning for the future is could be one way to frame it. Not talking about death so much as talking about having a living will. Sometimes the words you use are important, but especially in this place where it's so delicate. There's ways that you can bring it up, but you certainly wouldn't want to, blast that out to your entire donor database, unless, there's a way that you can frame it. I mean, I wish we had more concrete examples to give you, Misty, but I know that is kind of a sensitive area that can get overlooked and it's a huge source of income and revenue for a lot of nonprofits. So I'm sure it could deserve an entire webinar on it. But yeah, anything else to add there, Bradley?
No, I don't think so. And Ian, I think that might be a great idea, is to think about find some experts in the spot to do a webinar on. I bet it's something that a lot of people would be interested in tuning in.
Right. Maybe even contacting yourself, kind of a financial advisor in your local area, and sitting down with them for an hour and asking them, how do you bring up the topic of, living wills and and bequests and estate gifts, because I'm sure they have these conversations a lot with their clients. So finding someone who maybe is in the financial sector, financial advising, that is a supporter of your cause, who you can ask to spend some time with them to figure out a way to bring it up with your donors. I'm sure they have some really good tools and things that have worked to bring it up in a sensitive light. Great. You're welcome, Misty, and thank you for your questions, Misty and Sarah. With that, I have no other questions, Bradley, but this has just been really insightful for me as well. So thank you so much for coming out and sharing your knowledge today.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you.
And great. And thank you all for coming out today, folks. Please stay tuned for more free webinars coming up very soon. I think we're gonna have a Halloween themed one coming up at the end of this month. So stay tuned for that. Again, I want to thank our special guest, Bradley Martin from Kindful.
Thanks, Ian. Thanks for having us.
All right. Take care, everyone. We'll see you next time.